So now we're quite a bit in time later. We're talking, over 100 years, almost 200 years later, and we were talking about Deborah and Barak down as we were talking about Mount Tabor. It says this in chapter 4, verse 1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Now that Ehud was dead, so Yahweh sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan. Now this is around 1330. This is actually about 70 years later. Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera is his general. Okay? So now what the critics say is, see, you got Jabin in 1400 BC, and now you got Jabin, the same Jabin they say, and 70 years later in Judges 4 at Hazor. Now that's not a problem, because we have many parallels from the ancient world, that they're dynastic names that ruled over these cities, and so this is a dynastic name. So we have Jabin, the Joshua story. We have Jabin in the Judges story. On this site, there was found a tablet that gives us the name from the tablet, extra biblical source that gives us the name of the king of Hazor. Guess what his name is? Jabin. So let's go down to verse 23. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites. And the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him. Okay, so real simple. We have two destructions of Hazor in the Bible. One by Joshua and one by Deborah and Barak. Okay, so you have to have in the ground then two destructions, and that's what you have here. It's two destructions in the late Bronze Age. The destruction of Joshua that we read, is that the end of Canaanite Hazor?
Apparently not.
No. Why is it not the end of Canaanite Hazor?
There were more Canaanites.
Because they got to fight them again 70 years later, right? When Deborah and Barak destroy Hazor, that's the end of Canaanite Hazor. Okay, after that, it becomes occupied by Israelites. And remember, we've been talking about 1 Kings 9:15. 1 Kings 9:15, and we'll read that. It's on the sign over there. I think we'll just read it from the sign, but it says that Solomon built up 3 cities other than Jerusalem. He built up Megiddo, and we saw the gate that was at Megiddo. We'll see the one at Gezer, and the other city mentioned is Hazor. That's Solomon's gate right there. And we're going to walk through there and look at it. But I want you to think of this now, okay? Just take a look around. Look at Canaanite Hazor. That goes all the way out to those trees, 200 acres. And then look at Israelite Hazor. It's about 20 acres. This massive site. Everybody agrees with this. Critics, everyone has to agree with this. This was a huge Canaanite capital. It was destroyed, ceased to be Canaanite, and the next people that occupied it as a city were the Israelites. You can say that for this site. You can say that for all the sites in this country. So when they come and say, Joshua's conquest never happened, they got that problem. They got a Canaanite, all these Canaanite cities were destroyed by somebody, and then later they became Israelite, just like the Bible tells us. It's that obvious. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how this site fits into Egyptian chronology, and I'm just going to give you the very basics. According to the Bible, when the Exodus happens, and you just take the chronology of Egypt and put it up to the Bible, then the Pharaoh of the Exodus is Amenhotep II. Okay? And that the conquest, or the Exodus happens about 1446, just round it to 1450. Okay? So Amenhotep II, the pharaohs have lists of the cities that they fight against, or the cities that are paying them, because they're in control over them. So on the campaign list of Amenhotep II, we have Hazor. Now the other two theories that the conquest happened later and that it didn't happen at all say that this city wasn't occupied at this time period, late Bronze 1. Okay, well, if it wasn't occupied, then why is Amenhotep II putting it on his campaign list? It is occupied. If archaeology can't find that, it's a failure on archaeology side, not on history side, or not on the biblical side. You understand? It is a city. Amenhotep II, his son and the one who replaces him is Thutmose IV, but it's not his firstborn son. Makes sense, right? So Thutmose IV, we hardly know anything about him because he was such a weak ruler. When you're in Egypt and you're learning about all these pharaohs, there's hardly any information on him. We have that he existed and he didn't do any campaigns up in here or anything like that. Makes sense. His army got wiped out when in the Exodus. Okay, then his son is Amenhotep III. So Amenhotep II is the pharaoh of the Exodus. Amenhotep III is the pharaoh of the conquest. And then his son, you may have heard of him, Amenhotep IV, also called Akhenaten. Okay, and so Akhenaten moves the capital to a place called Amara. I also went to a site in Sudan, Amarna West, and I get it confused. Amara. Okay, so he has his archive there, which also include the letters to his father, Amenhotep III. So we have correspondence and tablets from Hazor here with Mari, which is up on the Euphrates River, and with Amara, which is down in Egypt. Now, some of them are written and addressed by name to Amenhotep III, and then others later are to Akhenaten. Okay, and I'm not going to read a bunch of them to you, but let me just sum up what the king of Hazor is saying at the time of the conquest in letters that are being sent down to Egypt. You ready? And look how big his city is. He's talking about a people called the Hapiru. Okay, or sometimes also called Hapiru. Okay, so the Hapiru is a term kind of like, the term Bedouin? Bedouin? It's kind of like that term, these nomadic or renegades, or it's used. It's connected to the name Hebrew, Hapiru, Hebrew. Okay, and it doesn't mean all Hebrews are Israelites, but certainly Israelites would have been considered Hapiru at the time. Okay, so these Hapiru are in here. And so the king of Hazor, along with letters from the other Canaanite cities, are being sent down to Egypt, and here's what the king of Hazor is saying. Help! Send troops! The Hapiru are upon us! They're going to conquer us! If you want your land, if you want your taxes, help us! Send troops! Look at the size of the city! People in tents are about to take this city! Help us! And he keeps pleading, help us, help us, help us! Amenhotep III doesn't send any troops. Silence. And then we have another destruction at the time of Deborah and Barak. They come back some, and then we have that destruction, and then we have an Israelite city here. It's so simple. The only reason it's confusing and the only reason you hear all these negative things is because you're being told these from a secular fields that are trying to plant those seeds of doubt in your heart, that none of this that you believe is true, that this is mythology. It's not mythology when you have Amenhotep II saying, hey, I destroyed Hazor, and when you have the Bible telling us everything that happens when the Egyptian chronology fits with the biblical chronology, with what is found in the ground. It's simple. And the only way it's simple is this. If this is God's word and you believe it, then you can look and see simply how everything lines up. And if you question it, and I don't know about this, let's see if it's reliable, and let's consider this, and then what this guy argues and what that guy, you will spend your entire life in the ocean of everybody's opinions and guesses and hypotheses and theories, and it's endless. The way to do it is to consider some of what they say, but to set it aside, you just take what the Bible says, you line up the chronology, you look at what you find in the ground, and you interpret it. That's what they used to do. So refreshing when you read John Garstang and people who dug before him, and that's what they used to do back then. And when you read a report from back then, it actually makes sense. And they reason with you, and they say, this is why, and you can follow it, and it's wonderful, and you can read. When you read an excavation report, up into the 60s and 70s, it get bad. Oh man, when you read an excavation report today, it's horrible. It's about being politically correct, if you can imagine, more than what happened in the past. If what happened in the past isn't considered politically correct, then it's got to have happened some other way, and then that's what's being portrayed as evidence for that. And it just is total confusion. Nobody agrees with anybody, and it's just going round and round and round. It's the Bible that helps us understand this place. And if we take it and throw it out the window, we are just giving ourselves over to total confusion. When we just take God for his word, then everything lines up. And if something doesn't line up, it's not a problem over on the biblical side, it's that we don't understand that. Can you imagine that we don't understand some things that happened, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago? Wouldn't we expect that? Wouldn't we expect some mystery? And that's what we find. So there are things that we haven't figured out. Now, here's an interesting thing. What they're looking for here, and the guy who digs here now, Amenhotep, who was trained by Yigal-Yadin, he dug here under Yigal-Yadin. He's been involved digging here for 50 years. He's actually really retired, but the one who was taking over for him unfortunately passed away. But Amenhotep, they've been looking for an archive here. An archive has never been found in Israel. And they know that one is here. Certain. Because they're communicating with Mari and they're communicating with Amara, right? Amana. I went to the Sudan, Amara West, Amana.
There are the Mari tablets, the Ebla tablets, the Nuzi, and the Amana, Mari, Ebla, and Nuzi tablets.
Yes, and so we know there's a library here. We know there's an archive here. And they've been looking for it for 50 years. But look at the problem. Where exactly is it? And so they're hoping, they've got a building that they're looking at that's going this direction over here, that they're hoping, now they can see down into the ground with the technology. They can see better than they have before. But if you look at this monumental entryway here, do you see all the way down, you see the basalt on either side? When we're in the Israel Museum, we'll see we'll see the real ones that they found there, but those are lions that are facing that way. And then there's a stand down there where probably a statue of a god would have stood.